All right, so today I want to go over the hologram stuff and how to get started on it. If you don't have your 3 done in Illustrator and I haven't checked them, do not start the After Effects part. I have to see your 3 in Illustrator before you go on to the actual animation part. Okay? Even though we're only animating 1, you still draw 3 of them. Delete that. Okay. So here is how we're going to take it from Illustrator into After Effects. The first thing we're going to do is go through and make sure that all of our layers are organized and separated. Obviously this part is a lot easier in Illustrator because we can very easily put stuff on the same layer. Anything that's going to be kind of in the same plane, you want to keep in the same layer. Anything that's going to be animated needs to be on a separate layer. Okay? So things like if you look close, I have these little plus signs. Those are on a separate layer because they're just going to be a background thing. These things here, the little rulers that go along the bottom, those are going to kind of slide left and right. Those will be on a separate layer also. These guides here, the light blue is the background. Those are on a separate layer. But all the light blue ones are on their own separate layer. So they're all like joined together because I'm not going to animate those background pieces individually. The bars that are on top, I will animate those individually, so each one of these is on their own separate layer. Okay, now we can join stuff in After Effects if we want. We don't need to worry about it too much, but you obviously want to get as much as you can here. I don't want to have, let's say, each one of these lines. I wouldn't animate each one of these lines separately, so I would never put each one of those lines on its own layer. That would just be a waste of extra layers, naming and everything else, okay? Same thing with these. I wouldn't put each one of these lines on a separate layer. They're all just in one layer. And actually these are, I believe this and this, if I set it up right, I can just click on that. Come on. Nope, I guess that's just on its own, and somewhere inside here, I have that other part there. Same thing on this side, these pieces that are here, if they're not going to be animated together, then I'll just keep them separated on different layers, okay? So just like we did before, we save it out as an Illustrator file, make sure all of our layers are labeled, which they are here. And I'm going to close my Illustrator file because I don't need it open. I mentioned that you will use at most 3 colors on this. I'm leaving mine black because I will color it inside of After Effects. That way I have a little bit more ease just to go in there and start tweaking with any of my colors that I play with. Then I'm going to go into After Effects. At this point, I've already made my hologram folder. Remember our template, I copied that. I renamed this to hologram, and then that's what I opened up. That one. Okay. This obviously isn't in there yet, but just so you can see where this would go, this is eventually where we're going to end up with is something that's very flat initially, and then we'll be able to take this and control like it moving in 3D. Okay, so then we can have the pieces like rotating around. We can pull it out so that there's 3D parts of it. If I hit play, you can see some of the pieces are moving. So you can see the little bar on the bottom is moving. If I zoom in here on the side, you can see that's moving. You can see these bars are moving here. Okay, so that's the idea. There's also some coloration happening on that. Okay, so that's where we're going to be taking this. I'm going to save this as and then just wipe everything else out so we can start basically from scratch. 3. Alright, so I'm just going to delete all my layers and stuff so we can get back to where this was. Compositions, yes. Okay, so now I'm back to where we initially would start. I'm going to bring in my UI. I'm going to set this to composition retain layer sizes. If you've named your stuff layer, like mine is called UI3, if you have UI1, UI2, UI3 all in the same folder, After Effects will recognize that as a sequence, and it'll try to bring in like a movie of frames 1, 2, 3. just make sure that this is clicked off, and that won't be a problem. Whichever one you've clicked and brought in, that's the one that'll come in. All right, so now here's UI 3. A lot of my stuff disappears because, if you remember, a lot of it was black. My background's black, so we're just not seeing it. So I'm going to go to my comp settings, and just temporarily, while I work, I'm going to set it to a gray so I can see it, and then I will tweak it afterwards, okay? Eventually I'll show how we can take this and actually put this like in a video, so if someone were interacting with it, we can get it in the video and make it somewhat look like it's interacting. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is start to organize all the stuff that's going to be in one plane. So I might have certain areas that, let's say, these little crosses that are in the very, very background, those are going to be like a ground plane, like a base for it, okay? These little levels will also be in a base for it. This ruler thing will also be in the base. I don't anticipate being able to or wanting to lift those off of that base because I don't think they would read very well because they're so thin of pulling it off, and there's not really a reason to do that. As the animator / designer, you have to decide how these things will move around. So there will not be that's how you're going to do it every time. You just have to decide. All right, so I'm going to grab everything that's going to be on, on this base layer. We'll see if that's good. I'm going to grab everything that's on the same base layer, and I'm going to pre-compose all of those things. So anything that's basically going to be on the ground flat, not coming up out of 3D, is going to be in this first pre-compose. So I'm going to grab my crosses, I'm grabbing my ruler bottom, my ruler top, I'm grabbing my background levels, and I'm going to grab all of these strips here. Okay, I'm going to add other stuff to it, but for now that's good enough. Control-Shift-C or layer pre-compose or right-click pre-compose, whichever you'd like. And this will be called base items. Okay, and the reason we do this, I had a second ago more than 50 layers. Now I'm down to 50 because I'm isolating the things that work together. So it's a lot easier just to keep everything that works together kind of in the same area. That way I can go into this pre-composition and start to work with just these items without having to look at all those other layers. Okay, so let me jump back into this and start grabbing other stuff that will also be in that area. So all of my circle dials, I'm also going to put in there. So I'm going to Control X and then Control V. And what I'm going to try to do, what I think will look good, is if my base had basically just like a frame going around it. So all the pieces that would kind of make a frame, I'm going to leave there. And the main 3D part will be that center ring that pops out. Okay? And again, that's my design. Your design may be a bit different. I'm going to grab these things. I'm going to grab, not that. These things again. Control X, go to my base items, paste them in there. I accidentally grabbed the outer ring, so I'll undo that. There we go. There we go. Okay, so that's there. I can turn off the base items at the bottom and see exactly what's on it. That's an easy way to get that. This I think will probably be good in the other one, so I'll cut that out, put this in here. All right, so that's a good starting point. So I'm going to leave it just like that. So now let's go through and animate some of the pieces that are inside here. So we can do straight ahead animation just like we've always done. We set a keyframe, we set a keyframe, we set a keyframe. But we want to work a little bit smarter on this because we're going to have so many different items that are moving around. So let's say I wanted to animate this bottom thing here. There it is, ruler bottom. So do things that obviously make sense. It doesn't make sense for me to scale this up. Like, there's no reason for that to scale. My vision for this is that it would offset. So it would kind of move left and right, but it doesn't just like clip. Like if I offset it here, you can see how there's like nothing right there. That's kind of stupid looking. I want it to actually just like offset and kind of like cycle forever if I needed to. So I'm going to go under Effect, I'm going to go under Distort, and I'm going to scroll down here. Nope, there it is. I'm going to go up here to the Offset and go there. Now what this offset does, if you use Photoshop, it has an offset very similar. It takes whatever's on the right side, and as it offsets, it moves it to the left side. So it's basically just like loops it over and over again. So if I grab this and drag, you'll see how it just continuously goes along there, like forever. Oops, I deleted it. So what I want to do is I want to offset this value. So let's say that I set some keyframes here. So I'm going to click on, I'm at frame 0, I'm going to set a keyframe. I'll go up to 15 seconds, pull it over, I'll rewind it, I'll play it. All right, that's a good speed. Then I go up a little bit further, and then I pull it back some, and then I hit play again. Oops. So now it's going to go one speed this way, it's going to hit that keyframe, and then go one speed back the other way. If I wanted to speed this up, what would I do? Move the keyframes, right? Closer keyframes means it'll go faster. Now let's say I want to take this animation and put it on something else. Well, now I have to make new keyframes for that other thing, right? So there's ways around this that we can make this a little bit more intuitive as to how this works. So I'm going to click my keyframes off here. I'm going to open up WordPad so we can see this better. And I'm going to Alt-click on my Shift Center 2. In the past, I've shown a couple of little expressions that we could do, like wiggle. Let's say I did 3 and 100, and then I hit play. You'll see every 3 times a second, it's getting a new value for the X and Y, and it's offsetting it. Obviously, that doesn't look good because it's offsetting both the X and the Y at the same time. I only want it to offset the X direction, so it only goes left and right. Okay? So this is what the expression currently looks like. Wiggle 3, 100. Okay, so this is taking, generating a random value and just moving it to that random value and then doing that 3 times every second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create what are called variables. If you've had any background programming experience, they're very common. So I'm going to say X variable equals wiggle 3, 100. And then I will do that, okay? So wiggle will typically give you back 2 values. I only want the first value. So that's what this is doing. It's saying just give me the first value of that wiggle expression, whatever the result is, and then store that into this X variable, okay? Then for the Y variable, I basically just want it to equal whatever the Y variable is. So whatever the Y value is. So whatever the current Y value is, just stay there. Like, don't change that at all. And then in order for the software to recognize what is the X, what is the Y, even though it has the word here, this could be anything to After Effects. We put a square bracket, we put X bar, comma, Y bar. Okay? Each line will use a semicolon at the end of it. That way After Effects knows this is the end of the line, this is the end of that line, this is the end of that line. So I'm going to copy this expression. I'm going to paste it. I'm going to pause my video there. I'm going to paste it into After Effects. And the only thing I need to change is, right now this is nothing. It has no idea what that is. That's just a word I typed in. So I'm going to use the Y val, so I'm going to highlight it, and I'm just going to use this pick whip and drag it to the Y value here. Okay? I could also have just typed in 35, but if I move it, I may want to just, not have to do that. So now if we watch this, we'll see that I have 0 keyframes set, and what it's doing is wiggling just that X position back and forth. Okay? Let me copy the expression. I'll paste it here so you can see the finished thing. This is what it's doing. So the X position is wiggling 3 times a second, and it's wiggling it 100 units. So it's going to go 100 units this way, 100 units that way, or 50 this way, 50 that way. And then the Y variable is just setting itself equal to whatever the Y variable already was. So whatever the Y was, that's what it is, and then this just assigns it. So if I wanted this to go slower, which value would I change here? The 3. Yep. Because this is how many times per second it's going, right? So would I make it bigger or smaller? Smaller, right? So if I say 0.25, that means for every 4 seconds, it'll make one move. So in 4 seconds, it'll go here. 4 seconds, it'll go here. 4 seconds, it'll go there, okay? So let's copy this again. You can see how fast it's going. I'm going to paste the new expression. And now we can see how slow it's going. Okay, we've set 0 keyframes, and we're getting this nice motion of this just kind of like rocking back and forth, basically. Now let's say I wanted to move further each time. Which value would I change here? The 100, right? So if I set this to, let's say, 500, and then I paste it in there, and then do that. Now it's going to go every 4 seconds, it'll go that far. Okay, it's not going fully 500. Sometimes it might only go 5 units. But it's going to give us this kind of like nice little motion. Sometimes it'll go fast, sometimes it'll go slow. Okay, now this is what's awesome about this. Because of how this is set up, okay, nothing in here is specific to that layer. So if I were just to copy the offset for the ruler bottom and paste it on ruler top, now I have 2 of these things that are animating the exact same they're animated the exact same way, but also in kind of like their own way. They're never really synced up. They're just kind of like moving at their own pace. Okay? Now, I may want them to move together. And again, this is where you have to just make decisions. You may not know what's going to look good, and it might just be, give it a try, see what looks good. If it doesn't, change it. It might look better this way, or it might look better that way. You have to experiment. So I'm going to open up my effects here. I'm going to open up my wiggle, and instead of this being equal to this wiggle, I'm going to drag my pick whip down to this one's X position. So then what that's going to do is when I hit play, you'll see that they'll now move together. Okay, so when one moves to the left, the other one's going to move to the left. When one moves to the right, the other one's going to move to the right. And again, it all depends, too, on what I'm trying to kind of convey, what message I'm trying to give off with this. Right? So that's much easier. If I decide I want to change something, I jump down to here, I change it. I'm just going to make this go crazy. So now it's going 10 times a second. So every 3 frames it's getting a new value. Just for fun, let's see what motion blur looks like on this. Probably just nothing, just totally blurred out. Yeah. Okay, we'll turn that off. And then we'll set this back to 0.25. I'll probably set my 500 to like 250 or 220. Okay, so that's the expression I ended up with on one of them. The other one, because of how that one's set up, that's what the expression looks like. So here, we're referencing the same layer. So whatever the Y position is of that layer, it's referencing it. Here, it's referencing the X position of a different layer. So you can see right here, it says this comp.layer ruler bot. It's referring to this one's X variable. That's what that means. Okay, we'll get more into that as we go. You're totally free to animate these by hand if you want. It's a lot of work to do it by hand. More work than you need to do. It is going to be overwhelming at first if you've never done any expressions or programming or anything like that. But if you trust me, it will be quicker. The first one's going to be hard. The second one's going to be a little bit easier. The third one will be a little bit harder. The fourth one will be a little bit easier. Eventually, you'll get it to where it's no problem. It's no big deal. You know exactly what to hit on, what to click on, and what to type in. Okay? Even with all my experience, I still go to Google and type stuff in because I don't know every single command for every single thing I need to do. All right, so I like the way that looks. I'm going to leave it like that. Cool. Let's go to these bars. Okay, I'm going to go to first this big strip here. I'm going to test out my animation. I know that I want this to scale, so it should go up and down, right? If I click and drag here, it scales it in both directions. That's probably not what I want, right? I probably just want one direction. I can think back to a time where I just isolated one value, and that was basically right here, right? I isolated just the X direction, but now I want to do it to the Y. So I just want the Y to move up and down and not the X. So I pretty much have the expression written. I just have to format it for scale now. So I'm going to Alt-click on that bar on the scale thing. First, I need to make sure my pivot is in the right spot. So I'll move my anchor point down here. There we go. Then I can Alt-click on this. And then I'm just going to paste that expression, and I'm just going to change a couple things. Oops, not that one. I'm going to copy this one. There it is. And I'm going to leave the wiggle on there for now. I'm just going to erase that area and replace it with its own Y. And then hit OK. Oops, that was actually backwards. My bad. Let's paste that again. It's actually opposite, right? So the X one we want to stay the same, and the Y is the one we want to wiggle. So let's switch those around. Let's drag the X pick whip to the X pick whip. There we go. And so now we'll see if I hit play. There it's dropping, wiggling around a little bit, and then getting higher. And again, we didn't set any keyframes. It's all based off of that expression. If we understand the one expression, you can see how it applies to another item. Now, it's obviously going way too high. Come on. All right, I'll just click and drag. There it goes. Ooh, too far. Okay. So a couple things I could do with this. I could, let me copy the expression so you can see it. I can take this 220, that's how much it's kind of wiggling it, that's how far it's going, and I can lower it. If I set that to 50, it shouldn't get any higher than the height of it. If it does, that's fine. I'll just set it to 40, or I'll set it to 30, or something like that, okay? I can just keep playing with it until I'm happy with where that's ending up. So now I hit play, or I can click and drag, and you'll see it's never going to go above it, because I've kind of set it into that range that it makes sense for that one. The other thing that I can do, let me set this back to 500 or whatever it was. I don't think it was that high. I think it was 250 or something. Okay. Actually, let me set it to 100, because it's going like underneath it. I don't want it to go underneath it. Okay, so now it's going above it like this. So one thing I can do is if I go to my effects, I go to channel, and I say set matte, I can tell it that I want to use the background of the levels as a clipping mask. So right now I'm going to say use the alpha channel but invert it. Use the alpha channel, use the... It does not want to use it at all. Stretch to fit, yeah. Nope, it doesn't like using it. That's fine. I won't use it. I will just isolate it so it's not in that value. Say 30. There we go. And again, I can kind of scrub through and just make sure that it doesn't go above that value. Okay. Now again, once I have that expression, I can jump to the next one, go to scale, make sure that the pivots are all at the bottom. I'll just do this to all these right away so I can see exactly all of them at the same time. And because I initially created them in Illustrator at different sizes, they're all going to have different values that they get up to. So those are all the thin strips. Where are my thick strips? There's one thick strip. There's the other ones. And the pivot doesn't matter if it's like way over here on the left or way over here on the right. It just has to be on the bottom because it's only moving up and down. It's not scaling outward like this. Okay, so now I'm going to Alt-click, paste the expression there, Alt-click, paste the expression there. Go to all my thin strips, hit S, Alt-click this, paste, Alt-click, paste, Alt-click, paste. So I'm just Alt-clicking on each one of these, and then when I'm done, I just click off. And then when I hit play, there's all of these kind of randomly animated. Now, as I look at that, I may say, I want this to go a little bit quicker. Then I could just jump into each one of those and change that 0.25. I make it 0.5, make it whatever I want. Okay, obviously there's two of these that are kind of going above, or several of these are going above where they need to. So I just need to isolate which those are and then change that value. Now here's another thing that I can do. If you think of these as, it's math is what it is. Oops, this should have a semicolon at the end of this. Let's pretend that this number here, the wiggle, generates a number that's over 100. So let's say it's 150. What is one way that I can make 150 a smaller number? Subtraction, right? So if I just subtracted, let's say 50 from this, it would automatically drop it down to 50, okay? Or 100 if it's at 150, all right? So let's copy that and try it out. So there's the problem one, yes, paste it. So now as we click and drag, it still goes above it, and it also does what? It goes below it, right? So if we're at 25, it's going to drop it down to negative 25, okay? So that's definitely right. That made it smaller. What's another thing we could do? Division. So if I divide this by 2, that will just cut the value in half. So if it is 150, it'll go to 75. And what's neat about that is what number divided would equal another negative number? Typically nothing, right? Unless it's a negative number already. So we'll just paste this here. And now if we look at it, you'll see that that one never goes below it and it never goes above it because we found a nice range for it, okay? Now, is there any difference in doing a division by 2 and a multiply times 0.5? No, it's the exact same thing. So typically, instead of me dividing something, I'll typically multiply. So I'll multiply times 0.5 or 0.6 or 0.7 or something like that. Okay, so just so you're aware, when I do it, I typically do multiplying by 0.5. But it's the same thing. What's the other one? So this one has a problem too, so we'll click on that one. We'll paste the same expression there. Maybe we'll give this one a little bit more movement because that's, a different range. Okay. That one gets pretty close to the top, but we won't see that. It's too far away. That little thin strip there, we'll also grab that one. Paste the expression. That one gets above it. Okay, and these are like introductory expressions. There's a lot more expressions that you could write for these kinds of things. I didn't paste the expression here, and I also didn't paste the expression there. There we go. Okay. Cool. So that is, it fits. Okay. All right. So now those ones that I just went over up to this point is pretty much the same stuff I've gone over in the other class. Okay. So I'm recording this video. That information and this information is the same in this class. I'm going to branch off and start showing different things. So if you want other information on more expressions of how I've animated some of these pieces, check out the other video at this point. Okay. And they're going to do the same thing. So let's say that I have some things that I want to animate, because everyone has different stuff. You may have different things that you want to animate inside your scene. So one of them might be something like this. I have a, make sure I didn't put that on anything. I have a bar right here. Let's say that I wanted this bar to scale out. Okay, just like as time goes on, it's like a progress bar. It's just getting to a certain point and then stopping there. Okay. So I'm going to take my fill and I'll leave that there. I'm going to take my stroke and turn that off. I'm going to put my pivot at the start of this. Okay, and then I could just go to the scale. It's 2 keyframes, a start and an end. It's not fluctuating along the way. And I would just set a straight up keyframe for this. I would say at the beginning, this is 0. Set a key. At the end, however long that is, this is 100. So now when I hit play, it just does that. Okay, that's not impressive. I'll get to the impressive part. All right, so this is a progress bar. Typically a progress bar should have some kind of percentage on there, right? 95%, 20%, whatever it is. So if I go to my text and I type something in here, I'm going to just type in hello just so we have something. What I can do is everything that has these stopwatches next to it has an ability for us to link stuff together, okay? So if I go to my text, you'll see next to the text there's a stopwatch, meaning that I can take something and feed it into that source text. So let's say that I alt-click on the source text. That gives me this pick whip, and then I'm going to pick whip this first number of the scale. So now if I click off, you'll see it says 100, because now it's reading that value. When I rewind to the beginning, it says 0. When I hit play, there's the number, okay? Now obviously this is not rounding it at all. This is like a huge number, right? 21 point whatever. Okay, and it's kind of neat how After Effects does. It's actually calculating out that many percentages as it's going. We don't want that, obviously. We want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I did the pick whip, it automatically writes the little expression right inside here. Don't be afraid to go out and look for different expressions. After Effects expressions is one of those things that will separate an amateur from a professional when it comes to motion graphics. Every professional I know knows at least some surface expressions like these that they can apply, because it's once you have them, it's just applying it to whatever you need to. So here's 16 useful expressions, 5 amazing expressions, super easy, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for a specific one on how to round numbers. Okay, I want to round this up to 21, 22, whatever it happens to be. I already know the expression, but I'm showing you so you can see it. Here it is. So there's a function inside of After Effects called math.round. And if I just type that at the beginning of where that expression is and put parentheses around it, it'll round whatever number is inside those parentheses. So if I go here and I type in math.round and put some parentheses around it, now it's rounding that number to 26. Now I hit play and there it goes. Sweet, right? And what's neat about this is, let's say that instead of me animating the scale, it starts here, it ends there. Let's say that I did put in like a wiggle expression on this. So I'm going to grab this one, because that's my X random one. And I just need to replace this with the Y. Okay. So now as this moves, you can see that that number is going to go up and it's going to go down and so on, right? So no matter what I do, it's going to constantly fluctuate in whatever it does. Sir?
What if you wanted to round it to like say 2 decimals?
You're pushing it then. Then we would go to Google and we would type in round numbers, decimals. And typically there's going to be some kind of expression that would do it. I already know what the expression is. If we multiplied the number by 100, then rounded, and then divided it by 100, that would give us our decimal points. I don't know if that's what they do here. Math.round 10 times x divided by 10. Yeah, that's like a long expression. That's like too long for me. Let's just try a regular one here. Oops, not that. Let's go here. So I'm going to copy this and paste it into my document. As you get comfortable with doing expressions and you find ones that work, make an Excel document or make a Word document or make something. Right, this is what the expression does, and then put the expression there. Anytime you need it, you can just copy and paste it right from that. So I'm going to take off this round, and I'll take off the parentheses too, that's fine. get the essentials of what I need. So I'm going to just call this x scale equals that. Okay, so this is saving the value of whatever that wiggle or whatever that scale value is and putting it inside here. So 21.753 blah blah blah. And then I'm going to take that x scale and I'm going to make it equal to x scale times 10. Oops, times 100, sorry. And then I will take x scale and make x scale equal to math.round x scale. And I'm kind of writing this all out. I might be able to condense this a bit further, but it's fine, just so you can see what each thing is doing. Okay, so this multiplies it by 100. So instead of 21.25, I get 2,125. It rounds it so it cuts off that distance. And then it divides it by 100, so it moves the decimal point back over, okay? Might work, it might not work. Let's find out. Let's paste, click. Hey, it worked, okay? So that's how a lot of expressions happen. You just say, I wonder if I can do this. Sometimes you won't find it on the internet. Sometimes it's just a matter of kind of breaking it down as to how would I do that, right? Cool, that works. Now this would also work for other stuff too. So let's say that I had this. I'm going to pull up some of my layers here just so I can get a little guide right in the middle. I guess I don't want the guide in the middle because I want to just click. There we go. All right, so I've clicked and I have this stroke right in the middle of this. There it is. Okay, I'm going to put my pivot for that stroke right at the bottom of it. Come on. It doesn't want to snap. That's fine. It's just being stupid. There we go. Okay. And then I'm going to go to rotate, and you can see how this rotates. Write a little expression on here. Wiggle 3 times a second and go 300 degrees. Actually, 3 times a second is a lot. Let me just set this to 1. Okay, so there we go. Perfect, okay. So now that's my value. Let me make another text. And here's, again, one of the great things about it. I just duplicate the text. I move it where I want this to be. And then I can just go to my expression for it and just change where it's getting its value from. So instead of it getting the value from the scale, I'm just going to pick whip, get it from the rotation. And so now as it rotates, it's getting the rotation value of it. Okay, literally anything inside of our scene, we can use that to get information and use that as just a random piece of text that just kind of updates in our scene. It's not pretty where it's at, obviously. It's functional though. Cool. All right, let's do some other stuffs. Let me hide these. Let's do this. I'm going to go and make a circle. I'm going to open up the ellipse. I'm going to go to the ellipse path. I'll make this, let's say 30 and 30. No stroke on that. Okay, I just have a red circle. That's all I wanted. I'll make it a darker color so we can see it better. There we go. So what I want this to do is I want this to randomly kind of move around the screen. Okay, so what expression should I use for making something move randomly? Wiggle, right? That's the only one I've shown, so probably it. So wiggle, let's say every two times a second, it's going to wiggle around 300 units. So there it goes. It's probably a bit aggressive for that, so let's go 200 units. And let's set this to maybe 1.2. There we go. That seems like a nice way to move, okay? Now I need more of these, right? As I duplicate each one of them, I get more of these things, and you can see they just move all over the place. So if I'm trying to create something that's kind of like graphical, kind of like wiggling around in the background, that's a nice way to do it. Typically, if you look at these things, go to my artwork folder, nope, my reference folder. There it is. Not that one, not that one. One of these has it, I know, I've seen it. Kind of like this, but that's a way too complex for what we're doing. And back to the beginning, dang it. I know it was on one of mine. Well, I'll just use the one example. It only had a couple in there. This one. So down here, you have these things, and basically they have a line that connects it to the center. It's hard to see, but it's there. Okay, so let's say that I want to have something very similar. I want to have a line connecting the center of that dot to the center of my screen. Okay, maybe these are airplanes flying around or something, and it's kind of tracking them. I'm going to make a new solid. Yep. I'm going to go to Effect. I'm going to go to Generate, and I'm going to go to Beam. And beam is, if you've ever seen Star Wars, these are laser beams. I need to change the length to 100 to make it fit. So it goes all the way from the starting point to the ending point. Okay? So this is, basically we have 2 points that can animate. They can move around. It doesn't matter which one I start with. Typically the starting point is where it would originate from. So if I set this starting point to the center of my screen, not there because that's the corner, 480 by 270, that's the center of my screen because it's half this direction and half that direction, so half of 960 by 540. And then the ending point, if I go to this position, that should be the ending point, right? So I'm going to Alt-click the end point and then make this bigger. This is why it's nice to have several screens. Click that to the end point. And now you see those are connected. And now I hit play. And you can see how that laser beam is now following it around. Now, again, it looks ugly, so I need to fix that. Let's go to the colors. Obviously, these are horrible colors. I'm not picking great colors for now. I'm just grabbing any color just so we can see it. I'm just going to eyedrop the same color. There we go. Actually, I'll just make it white. Can't see it on there because it's too dark. There we go. So now we can see that. It's also a bit soft, so I'll take the softness off. So now it's just crisp. The beam is above the layer, so I'll just move it below the layer. That has no bearing on how it's displaying. It's just a matter as far as how it's animating. It'll now just be displayed underneath that. So now as it plays, you can see how it's then connected to that piece. Okay. Now I could also take this and maybe make the starting point or starting thickness 0, and then the end thickness I'll leave it 8. And that didn't look good at all. Hold on. We'll set that to 1 at the start. There we go. And so now we have a little bit of perspective, right? So now it's starting off very, very tiny and then getting obviously bigger. And I don't know why it's stretching away from it. It's just being stupid, maybe. Maybe this wants to be 2. Nope. Well, I would figure that out. For some reason, this is not perfectly lined up. Let me open up my content here. Let me open up my ellipse. Let me open up my transform. Make sure this is all zeroed out. It is. Make sure my ellipse path is zeroed out. It is. I don't know why you would be off. I don't know. Let's go back to our shape layer. Yep. So it's just that thickness. That thickness wasn't thick enough to actually touch it, so I just make it a little bit bigger. And now it works. Cool. I could also make, obviously, the ending part thick enough so that it looks like it's a little bit more connected to it some. And then here's what's cool about any of these expressions is that once they're written for one, it's just a matter of copying it and changing names. So if it's layer 1, then it's layer 1. Layer 2, then the next one will be layer 2. Especially if I've copied these spheres, or the circles, I can just take gray solid 2. I'm not going to duplicate this in my final one, but just so you can see, I can duplicate it. Go to the expression and then just change shape layer 1 to shape layer 11 to shape layer 10. And now I have 2 of these going. Right? Now this is why I don't want to have this, because I don't want to have like 50 layers. Like that's a lot of unnecessary stuff. If I can do it all within one layer, that's better. So if I turn this composite on original on, oops, not composite on original on, leave that off. I'm going to duplicate the beam. That's what I want to do. And then on that layer, I will change that to number 10. Okay, and then on beam 2, I think I will turn that on. Yep, there we go. So this one I keep it off because I don't want to see the background like that. And then the second one I keep it on. And now I have 2 of them. Now I could also, instead of having it directed at the origin and then having it directed at the other one, I'm going to copy the expression that it wrote. I'm going to open up the beam, Alt-click on the starting point, and then paste it and just change the number. Instead of it being 11, it's going to be 10. So now 11 and 10 are connected together. You can create some very, very cool effects doing this kind of thing. So I wiped out the beam effect. I'm going to wipe out all of these other shape layers. I don't know if that one is. Okay, so I have a shape layer circle here, a gray solid, and then a shape layer circle here. And they both kind of animate like this. Let me get one more of these. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to create a beam that will connect all 3 of those together. All right. If we think about it, this beam will basically connect this one to that one, and then another beam will connect this one to that one, another beam will connect this one to that one, right? So I only need like 3 beams. So if I go here, I go to my generate, I go to beam. Again, I'll pick white. I'll take the softness off. I'll take the length all the way up. And then I'm going to go to my starting point. And instead of this being called layer blah, blah, blah position, okay, like if I were to click on the position of this one and then use this pick whip and grab that, this basically locks it just to that layer. What would be cool is if I could just lock it to a relative position of a layer stack. So if I just said the layer above it, that's what I want you to connect it to, that one's position, okay? So if I go again back to Google so we can see this, After Effects, Expressions, Index. Okay, so this is where we would use this thing called index. Maybe it's under this one. There we go. So instead of me typing layer and the layer name, I just use the word index. It basically lets me refer to which layer I want, okay? And that just means which layer above it. So instead of this being this whole mess here, if I just said layer, parenthesis, index, dot transform, dot position, I get an error. Why am I getting an error? Make sure I type that right. Layer, parenthesis, index. If you're not familiar, Lester Banks has some awesome tutorials on After Effects as well. There we go. This comp layer index. This comp.layer index. Oh, I forgot this comp. I did that at last class too. Every time. There we go. So right now it's referring to its own position. Okay, so it's referring to gray solid's index position. All right, that's what the current expression looks like. So it says this composition, you put a dot between everything, the layer index. It's getting its transform, it's getting its position. So if I were to just say layer -1, it would grab the layer below it. If I said layer +1, it would grab the layer above it. Okay, now it's above it number-wise, not above it physically above it. The numbers in After Effects layers, if you look here, this is layer 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I said minus, it actually grabs physically the layer above it, but it's the number below it. Figure that out, okay? So I'm just going to paste that. And so now it's grabbing the layer below it and putting that there. So again, that works. Perfect. Now let's say I did the expression here. I pasted it. And I said the layer 2 up there. Okay, so now it's 2 above it, so now we have that one. Sweet. So if I were to copy this, just so you can see what's going to happen, remember it's all based on index. If I duplicate this layer, it's now referring to the layer above it, which is this one, and the layer above that, which is this one. This layer has the same expression, so it's going to refer to the layer above it and the layer above that. Okay, so you can see where the predicament is because now this one isn't moving. It's only these two that move. So when I hit play, you'll see one area is stuck there, right? So instead of doing this, which is -1, -2, whoops. What I'm going to do here, what I'm going to attempt to do, is do -1 + 1. And if I put my beam in between layers, it'll do one beam here, one beam there. Okay? So I'm going to delete that layer. I'm going to go to my expression. What did I didn't type? No, I didn't type anything there because this now has to be between these two layers, and now that will work. Okay, now watch what happens when I take this and duplicate it and move it between these two layers. Now it automatically connects those. Now obviously I need one that's going to connect the other two, but this is a lot simpler than having to do a whole bunch of other stuff. So I just duplicate this again, move it here, go to my expression, and I'm going to specifically call out, or I'm just going to go, what is that one? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to say +4. I could pick whip it too, but my goal is to create something that's kind of like connecting all of these. +1, yes, +5. There we go. So now all of these are kind of connected together. And because of how this area is set up, if I were to then duplicate this, move the group together, it should move this whole thing and give me another one that works just like it. Okay, so I'll try that. I'm going to duplicate. It's going to be messy at first. I just move this below the other ones. And now I have 2 of them that'll do it. Okay, and if I wanted to, I could actually connect one triangle to the other triangle and so on. If you do anything like this, I recommend obviously formatting your beams before you do it, because right now I have these beams that are too thick. I have to go through each one of these gray solids, yes, like so, like so, like so, and then take their starting thickness to like 2 and 2. Now you'll see even though I selected them all, it only did it to the 1. So I have to actually physically go through each one of these and type 2 and 2. So I'm not going to do that, but that's how we can do it, okay? So there's a lot more stuff that we could definitely play with in expression land, but let's get into the actual UI stuff that we could then play with some of this, okay? And again, the nice thing about separating it, I can jump back into that, screw with whatever I want. All of those changes will then come into this one. Oops, let me get rid of all those things here. I don't need that in my actual one. Yes, good. There we go. So here's my things going back and forth. Here's these things going up and down. Cool. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off everything but my green stuff, these ones, and my base items. So I'm going to hide all of this. I believe till there. Nope, even further. Yep, there we go. So now I just have my green items on there. As I move these things around, I want to keep in mind how each one of these items are going to move. Okay, some of them make sense to not really rotate. Some of them make sense to rotate because of just their design, right? So something like this with the little teeth on it, that makes sense to kind of rotate it. But this one here in the middle, that's perfectly round, even if I rotated it 1,000 degrees, you wouldn't notice it because it's perfectly round, okay? So this one here, if I rotate it, you can see there's nothing happening. It's just rotating. If I go to this one and rotate, same thing. It's just rotating, but nothing's happening. The other ones, as I rotate them, I'll see that they rotate, okay? Now I want to redo what I just did. There we go. I want to order these in the way that I think that they would be set up. So starting from the outside, that would basically be the lower stuff, and then the very top of this would be the inner stuff. Again, this is your design, so you can have it either way. So I'm going to make sure that my outer ring right here is in the very bottom, so I'm going to move it down. And then what is this? Green center back, that's going to stay on the top. This is a solid ring, so that will be about there anyway. Yes, yes, okay. This is another one with teeth on it, so that will stay there. This one will stay there. This one will stay there. Okay, these two will swap spots. There we go. That's something that I should have hidden. That's something I should have hidden. This is something I should have hidden. And that should come up to there. There we go. Okay, so now I have all the things in order. So there's the very bottom to the very top. I'm going to take the items that are here, and I'm going to parent them to the ones that should move with it. So as my video, when someone would, let's say, click the middle thing or pull it up, that center is going to rise, and then everything below it would also rise too, okay? So I'm going to take the center ring here. No, I'm going to take this bottom ring here, and I'm going to parent it to that. Is that the way I want to do that? And then if I move that individually. Nope, I got that the wrong way. So I'm going to take the top here and parent it to the thing below it. And I'm going to take this one and this one, because these two kind of go together because they're basically like the same area. And those will be parented to the thing below that, number 6. This one and that one will be parented to number 4. And then this one will be parented to number 2. Okay. Now all of these here will eventually be 3D, so I'll make them all 3D. If I go and rotate this, you can see how everything rotates together. If I grab all of these things here and I hit their position and I move them in the Z direction, you can see how they all kind of move together. Okay? If they were parented the opposite direction, they wouldn't do exactly that. If they weren't parented at all, they wouldn't rotate, they wouldn't move like this. They would all move as one big chunk upwards. But what happens is, as this one moves up, as this one moves up, there we go. As this one moves up, it takes the ones below it also up. And then as this one moves up, it takes those. And as this one moves up, it takes those. And as this one moves up, it takes those. Okay, so when I grab all of these and do, not that one, and do the position here, we get this kind of neat effect of how that's like growing. Now I typically don't want to reset my rotate. I typically don't want to have this just by itself. I want to animate it using a null. Nulls are great because they allow us to have one item that we can move around and have a whole bunch of stuff kind of affected by it. So I'm going to go to my layer. I'm going to make a new null. And I'm going to make sure it's perfectly centered. So I'm just going to move this. Let me turn on my, nope, not title action save. There we go. So I'm pretty close to where that needs to be. I just need to scoot that over just a bit. Okay, so now if I go to the very top of this, oh, that's good there. If I go here and I move outer teeth ring, so that's parented to that, make sure it's 3D. As it rotates, oops, I put it backwards. Sorry. There it goes. This one is parented to the null. As this rotates, it rotates the whole thing. So now I'm able to take the null and have that be my controlling object for how this thing is going to rotate around. Okay, it's a little bit off, I can see, so I'll have to adjust the position of it. Let me go to my shape here. I'll grab my guides and I'll just line this up like that and line this up like that. Let me turn my null off so I can see better. Yep, that looks good. Then I can take the null and just move it so that it is perfectly lined up after I unparent it. There we go. So that should work. Let's see. Parent that back to the null, go to the rotation. Yep, that's perfect. Okay, so now this is rotating perfectly all the way around. Now on some of these other pieces, the pivot might be off on them. As I click, you can see this green teeth ring. The pivot is way over here. So I need to move the pivot and line it up. I can't do that when it's parented to something else. So I have to make sure that nothing is parented to number 4. So I'm going to take these two and just turn them off for now. Then go to number 4, move its pivot. Make sure I'm in the pivot mode. There we go. And then turn these back on to number 4. Turn that back on to number 4. Go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one. I think that was the only one that I had the issue with. Yep. So now everything should rotate perfectly around this way, and that way. And again, if I were to grab all of these pieces with my null and rotate it this direction, I'll get several pieces kind of rotating simultaneously, so they're all kind of like linked together, rotating. Same thing here, as I rotate it this way, you'll see this kind of like neat, wind instrument thing that you'd keep outside your house effect. Okay, now I'm going to set up one more thing in here before I let you start playing. On the null itself, it would be great if I could control some of the stuff from the other composition. So right now, if these things on the bottom and top, maybe they move too slow, maybe they move too fast. The only way I'm going to be able to tweak it is by going back into this composition, back into the rulers, and then editing this expression. If I have something in the other one that allows me to control it there, I don't have to go all the way in here. So I'm going to go back to my user interface. I'm going to go back to my null. Let me call this green controller, so I know what it's called. I'm going to go to my expression controls and I'm going to add a slider control. And what this will do is it'll basically create a slider here that I can manipulate something else on. Okay? Basically I'm creating something I can link an expression to. If I click on the other composition, that slider control goes away. So I need to go back, click the lock, go back, and now I can alt-click on, or not alt-click, I can click on my thing here and link whatever I want to it. So if I know that I'm going to be adjusting maybe the speed of this, I'm going to go to where that says 0.25 for the speed of that ruler going back and forth, and I'm just going to pick whip the 0.25 to the slider. So now if I go back to my user interface, I hit play, the slider isn't moving at all because this is set to 0, so it's saying move 0 times. If I set it to 2, now it's going to move 2 times a second. If I set it to 3, now it's moving 3. If I set it to 0.5, now it's moving 0.5. Without having to go into an expression, without having to dive into another composition, it's all right here on the interface. Okay, and I can do that for any one of these other items. If I see, let's say, my strips here, there it is. So there's my multiplier that says times 0.5. I could go back to this controller, back to the expression controls, add a slider. Obviously I should name these so that makes more sense. So this is ruler speed, bar speed. I can highlight the bar speed here and then pick whip the bar speed right there. And then again, I won't see any movement because it's set to 0, probably that one. And then as I crank this up, there it is. Okay, so there's lots of different ways that we can manipulate this. It's just a matter of how we want to manipulate it, what we want to do, how are these things moving. You're not going to know